those of you that bought the book. Now, you don't have to buy a book unless you want to get out of the building. So we've employed some off-duty KKs armed with replica or fake AK-47s that'll be at the door. That's the inside joke for you Houston ladies. We panicked the other day because some guy was walking around with a plastic gun or something. Okay. So we'll be selling books after, and we encourage you to get one because I'm in a kind of a three-way contest with this book with seeing who can sell the most, and I'm up against Rick Perry and George Bush. Yeah, I'm just glad I wasn't up against Sarah Palin when her book comes out. Okay, I want to talk to you today what I call the Medal of Honor Project. Now, this started in November of 2007. I was in the Corps Center. Excuse me, I'm losing a little voice. I was in the Corps Center, and I looked at two Medals of Honor, Attorney Leonard and Eli Whiteley. And then I looked up on the wall, and there were 7 large, they call them bas-relief bronze plaques of the 7 Medal of Honor people. And I thought to myself, well, where are the other medals? Then I'm giving you my train of thought. And I thought, well, we ought to know. Somebody ought to know. Well, no one knew at the time. So I took it on myself to go out and find them. Now, I did find the missing 5. I located the missing 5. And out of the missing 5, I convinced the families to put the medals in the Corps Center, and they're on display there. Now, during this search, which involved, internet and writing people and quite a bit of searching around the country, I started accumulating information, and pretty soon this stack got higher and higher, and I thought to myself, well, there's a book there. Well, somebody should have written this book years ago, but they didn't. But there's a book there. I went over to the archives. They had very little information on these Medal of Honor recipients. They, I had a few newspaper clippings, but nothing nothing substantial. Well, they do now because I dumped it on them after I finished the book. Now, I talked to, I was kind of unsure. I've written a book before about my own life, but it's not for sale. And so I wasn't sure about this, and I started talking to a few people. I talked to Haskell Monroe. He's usually here passing out information, but I didn't see him today. But I talked to Haskell Monroe. I talked to Detloff, Dr. Henry Detloff, who was of great help to me, and I don't even think he's here today. Yeah. Detloff was the guy that told me, he said, I was talking to him about mistakes and copy, proofreading and everything. He said, listen, I don't care how much you try, you're going to find mistakes in your book after it's published. So I thought about that, and I went home and I got his book and looked at it, and sure enough, there were mistakes in there. Now, there may be some in my book. Now, if you look at the book, you'll see some marvelous maps, and our own Ann Boykin did those for me, and I'm deeply thankful or appreciative of her efforts for the maps in the book.
Did you tell them about the trade we worked out?
Oh, I don't know.
I had been admiring this really nice vintage wooden cigar box that Jim was coming back and forth to the office with. It had World War II medals in it, and I admired it every time. And bless his heart, when he came in, he said, "I need to pay you for those maps." I said, "No, my dad would never let me take money from you for doing these maps for you. I'm doing this for my dad." And he said, "Well, all right, you can have my cigar box." I'm like, yes.
And of course, I had my first proofreader was my dear wife, Gloria. And so if you find any errors, you can talk to her about that. And then I had my daughter, who has a journalism degree, lives up near Detroit, Michigan. I would send her, I'd write a chapter and send it to her, and she'd proof it and send it back. And she was kind of my politically correct officer for this project. She said, "You cannot call Japanese Japs." Well, yeah, who knew? Now, just the other day I learned that red meat is a racist remark, and red wine is even worse. That's another local joke. Some idiot wrote a letter to the editor saying that change the name of this red wine festival because it's... Okay, anyway, so I'm now politically correct. And I'm not even following my script. Okay, why don't we start on the slides? I'll tell you about these 7 people. This is Pete Hughes. Old Pete was born in Alexandria, Louisiana in 1921, but he was raised in Refugio. Now, while he was there, he was a star football and basketball player. He entered A&M in 1939, which was an exciting year at Aggieland. And it's about time we have another exciting year. We'll see Saturday. He majored in petroleum engineer and was a member of Company G in the infantry. Now, like so many freshmen, he had academic trouble the first year and he dropped out of school, but he attended junior college in Corpus Christi. And he returned to A&M in September 1941. Now, when his father became ill, he had to withdraw in order to help the family. He was the oldest of 5 brothers, and they needed his help at home. And then the war started 4 days after he left school. And he enlisted as an aviation cadet in the Army Air Corps in 1942. And he was commissioned a second lieutenant in November of 1942. Now, his unit deployed to England. He was in the 389th Bomb Group. They deployed in June 1943, but they only stayed a short time in England, and then they flew down to Libya, where they would participate with 4 other bomb groups in the raid on the oil refineries in Ploiești, Romania. But next slide. Now, during the low-level attack on August the 1st, 1943, Hughes B-24 was hit with small arms and aircraft, and it was streaming gas out the left side of the wing tank. And rather than abort the mission, he flew into the burning area, and remember that this was a low-level attack, and the flames were higher than his altitude, so he flew right into the flames, which is not a good idea if you draining gasoline out of your tank. And but he did put the bombs on target, and he later crashed in a dry riverbed. Now that's an actual picture of his plane going down into the dry riverbed. And on the right-hand side, about halfway up, you can see his plane was Old Kickapoo, and Old Kickapoo was going down. And also on the right-hand side, this is a picture of his plane cartwheeling into the stream bed. Now, his remains were returned in 1950 and buried at the Fort Sam National Cemetery. Now, one unique aspect of this book is that there's a section for each one, or at least the 5 that were killed in action. There's a section on repatriation and burial for each one. And this, I've never seen this in another book, where usually it's somebody gets killed and they're buried. That's it. Well, I've tried to fill in the difference in between those 2 events. He was the first Aggie awarded the Medal of Honor. This is Tom Fowler. He was also born in 1921 in Wichita Falls. He spent his summers working on family farms in Burke Burnett and Floydada. He graduated from Wichita Falls High School and entered A&M in 1939. He was a member of B Troop in the Cav. His senior year, he was a cadet captain and served as the XO of the Cavalry Squadron. In February 1943, he attended the Officer Candidate School at Fort Knox. And then he returned, next slide, then he returned to Wichita Falls for a few days and married his high school sweetheart, shown here at the Aggie Ring Dance. And then he joined the 191st Tank Battalion in Anzio, the Anzio beachhead, in March of 1944. In May of 1944, he was serving as a liaison officer to an infantry regiment in the 45th Division during the breakout from the Anzio beachhead. He took command of 2 disorganized infantry platoons that were held up by a minefield. He then led the soldiers through the minefield. He personally captured several enemy soldiers and killed several others as he led the advance. When his position was almost overrun, he withdrew and administered first aid to several wounded infantrymen. 10 days later, while commanding a tank platoon on the advance towards Rome, he was killed in action. In 1948, his body was returned to Wichita Falls for burial. His wife was presented the Medal of Honor, and this is a clip. I tried to get a picture of this, and I never could, so I had to settle for that picture, but these things are hard to find sometimes. George Dennis Keithley, class of 1937. He was born in Olney, which is over near Graham, if you know where that is, and he was raised on the family farm and attended school at Olney. But he left high school and moved to Lawton, Oklahoma to live with an older brother and to work in his brother's meat market. And he was trying to pay his way through school. He graduated from high school in Lawton and then attended Cameron Junior College. In 1933, he enrolled in Texas A&M to major in agriculture and was a member of Troop D of the cavalry. He was a student worker and he continued to pay his own way. But like many students during the Great Depression, he was forced to withdraw in the spring of 1935 for financial reasons. But he found employment with the Soil Conservation Service. In May of 1942, he was assigned to the 338th Infantry Regiment, 85th Division at Fort Shelby, Mississippi. Now, his unit went into action in Italy, and this is a shot of some of the terrain in Italy. He went into action in Italy in April of 1944, and on September the 19th, 1944, his unit attacked to capture Mount Altuzzo and break through the Gothic line. He was killed in action while assuming command of two platoons that had lost all of their officers and NCOs. His unit successfully repelled furious German counterattacks. His last words were, "Please write my wife a letter. Tell her I love her, and I did everything I could for her and my country. So long. Give them hell for me. I'm done for." Next slide. Before going overseas, Keithley told his wife that if he was killed in battle, he wanted to be buried where he fought. Following his wishes, he was buried in the Florence Military Cemetery, and that's near Florence, Italy. In 2000, there was a controversy about placing his name on the Veterans Memorial in Young County. Now, this is a very interesting story, and it's unbelievable, but it's in the book, so you can read it there. It gets a little involved. He was the third Aggie awarded the Medal of Honor. Horace Carville, class of 1938, was born in Fort Worth. He was raised on the north side, and he was active in football, basketball, and baseball. He graduated from Northside High School and entered A&M in 1934 with the intention of playing football. He majored in agriculture. Now, when he did not make the football team the first year, he withdrew. Evidently, best I can determine, he was more or less working his way through school because his father was kind of a blue-collar worker in Swift Packing Company there in Fort Worth. So when he got back to Fort Worth, he worked for a year, and then he enrolled in TCU, where he did play football and baseball. He lettered 2 years in football and 3 years in baseball. He graduated from TCU in August '39, and in March 1940, enlisted in the Army Air Corps as a flying cadet. After several stateside assignments, he was promoted to major and assigned to the 308th Bombardment Group in China. After 3 months of combat flying, he was given command of a special detachment of B-24s with the mission to interdict enemy shipping in the South China Sea. Flying alone on October the 15th, 1944, during a nighttime sweep, he sank a destroyer and a cruiser. Those are Japanese, not Jap destroyers, I guess. And he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for that action. On October the 26th, on another sea sweep, he attacked a convoy of 12 ships. His first bomb run resulted in hits on a destroyer and some other ships, but his B-24 sustained heavy damage. And he, trying to make the coast, he was struggling to maintain altitude. Then he learned that his co-pilot was wounded. And then his bombardier reported, well, my parachute's damaged. And Carswell was going to have the people bail out, but here he had two people that couldn't bail out. But he was determined to save his crew one way or the other. Now, the other crew members did bail out, but they saw his plane crash into a mountain a few miles away. This is the Carswell Monument at the Navy Air Station Joint Reserve Base in Fort Worth. And it's a long story of how I finally found this. No one up there knew anything about it, didn't even know where it was. I sent Buck Henderson, who many of you know, on a little covert action there, and he penetrated a restricted area and took this picture for me. Now, Carswell was initially buried at a Catholic mission in Tongcheng, China. His remains were repatriated in 1948, and today he is buried on Fort Worth's north side at the Oakwood Cemetery. And if you read the book, what you need to do is to count how many times Carswell was buried, and you'd be surprised. He was the fourth Aggie to win the Medal of Honor. Next slide. And this Attorney Leonard, he lived with his grandparents for many years down in the valley, but he moved back to Dallas, where he attended Dallas Technical School, and then he enrolled in A&M in 1938. His fifth year, he was a member of Company C Infantry, but when they reorganized the Corps, he went to Company I, and his senior year, he was the company commander. During his 4 years here, he was a waiter, first in Sabisa and then in Duncan Hall, and he was paying his own way through school, but he did have some help from an uncle, Tyree Bell, who some of you may know about. He graduated with a degree in agriculture administration, and he was commissioned as second lieutenant in May of 1942. And then he joined the 893rd Tank Destroyer Battalion at Fort Shelby. His battalion landed at Normandy on July the 1st. And fighting across France and Belgium, they entered Germany. And they were supporting the 28th Infantry Division. And they fought in the Battle of the Hürtgen Forest. Leonard was a platoon leader of a tank destroyer platoon in the vicinity of Kommerscheid. He was wounded in the face but refused evacuation. And when the Germans mounted a major attack, Leonard moved on foot to a position to direct the fire of his destroyers. The attack was repulsed, but the Germans mounted another assault, and they were again stopped. Leonard received a serious wound that almost severed his left arm. He was last seen heading for an aid station. The American position was overrun, and Leonard was reported missing in action. An interesting sidelight about Leonard is that his company commander was the quarterback of the 1939 football team. Anybody know who that was? Yeah, Marion Pugh, there you go. Marion Pugh. His body was not recovered until November of 1949, and he was identified in January of 1950 and returned to the States and was buried in Dallas. Now, it was an involved search, and I've written quite a bit about it in the book. This is the tank destroyers in the Hürtgen Forest, and this is where the Aggie ring, some of you may remember that in 2000, this Aggie ring was returned by a German officer, and there's a big ceremony at Kyle Field and the ceremony in the Corps Center. The ring and his Medal of Honor is on display at the Corps Center. Again, if you want to know about the return of the ring, the story's in the book. Eli Whiteley, my agronomy 107 or something like that. 106. 106. He was my agronomy prof. And I don't remember a thing about agronomy. All I know is Japanese, not Jap. Okay, he was born over near Florence, Liberty Hill in 1913, and he graduated from Georgetown High School, and he applied for A&M in 1932. And he was told that he should take more high school courses or attend a junior college. So I didn't even know they had restrictions in 1932. Did you know that, Dan?
Yep.
You knew that, oh. So it appears that he wanted to major in engineering, and his math, he didn't have that much math background, or he was weak in math. So he decided he knew he was going to have to work to go to school, so he decided, well, I'll just lay out and earn enough money to put myself through school. Now, you got to remember, this is in the middle of the Great Depression. So after 3 years of working in various jobs, chopping cedar, building rock fences, waiter in a cafe, working in a service station, working in a tailor shop, he did it all for 3 years. And then he got a job with the AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Agency. So after 6 years later, he decided he had enough money, and he applied for A&M, but this time he applied to study agriculture, and of course he was admitted. But he graduated in 3 years, and then he was drafted in April 1942, was commissioned in April 1943. He joined the 15th Infantry Regiment in 1944 as an infantry platoon leader, and it was during the Battle of Segelsheim, and that's near Colmar in Alsace. During the Battle of Segelsheim on December the 26th, 1944, he led the attack on the village and was credited with killing 9 Germans and capturing 23 others. I think one of the most interesting illustrations we have in the book is the one showing the schematic showing making his way through the village and what happened at each house that he captured. He suffered head, arm, shoulder, and leg wounds, and he was left for dead at the aid station. And while he was lying next to the aid station, a French doctor who was helping out the Americans noticed that he was still alive and gave him treatment. And Eli Whiteley always said that that's the guy that saved his life, that Frenchman. He spent many months in the hospital and was discharged in May of 1946. And I know when he was my prof, he still was suffering. You could tell he hadn't completely healed. He was still suffering from some grievous wounds. President Truman presented him with the Medal of Honor at the White House. And after he came back, he attended graduate school, he went back to graduate school at North Carolina State. He later received his PhD from Texas A&M and had a distinguished career at A&M in ag experiments. He died in December of 1986. Now, he was only the second person to lie in state on the campus. Anybody know who the first one was? Earl Rudder. Boy, y'all are good. Don't know. That's in the rotunda of the administration building when he was lying in state. Funeral services were held in Rudder Tower, and a military cortege carried his body to the North Gate. He was the 6th Aggie to be awarded the Medal of Honor. George Harrell. He was born in Rio Grande City in 1922 and graduated from Mercedes High School. He entered A&M in 1939 and was assigned to Sea Troop Cavalry, majoring in animal husbandry. He lived in the project houses and worked his way through school. And he was working his way through school. After 4 semesters, he had to leave school to earn enough to continue his education. And then along came Pearl Harbor and the Japanese. He enlisted in the Marine Corps in July 1942 and was assigned to the 28th Marine Regiment of the 5th Marine Division that landed on Iwo Jima. On the night of March the 2nd, 1945, he and another Marine occupied a foxhole 20 yards in front of their company command post. Harrell's position was attacked by a platoon of Japanese, and during the battle, he killed at least 5 of the enemy and was seriously wounded, and he lost both hands. The next morning, his foxhole was surrounded by the bodies of 12 enemy soldiers. His commander later called the position the 2-man Alamo. And this is a picture of Harrell. Of course, he has no hands, so he's smoking using a cigarette holder. He spent many months in the hospital at Mare Island, California, and was released from the hospital in February 1948. He also received the medal from Harry Truman at the White House. You can see there his prosthetics, yeah, okay. You can see that's a shot of that. He lost both hands. He applied to return to A&M and was accepted. But then he got a job with the Veterans Administration, and he eventually became the chief of the prosthetics division in the VA Center in San Antonio. He died in 1969, and he's buried at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery. He was the 7th Texas Aggie awarded the Medal of Honor. Now, I invite each of you, if you haven't been there, to visit the Corps Center next time you're on the campus. And the center's open from 8 to 5, and it's open to the public. And there you can see the 6 original Medals of Honor. And I say original because I've had some problems with people. Like one fellow, a brother of one of these fellows, called me and said, "Why do you want that Medal of Honor?" I said, "You already got it. It's over there in the MSC." No, that's a replica. Actually, it's against the law to have a replica. I don't know how they got it, but you know, to duplicate that. But I've had several people question me about those displays in the MSC, which have been moved to Rudder Tower. I hope when they move them back to the MSC, they'll somehow tell people that, okay, these are replicas, and if you want to see the real thing, go over there at the Corps Center. Good luck with that one. So if you have any questions now, I don't know how much time we've got, but I'll be glad to answer whatever questions you have on